2021 wasn't too bad. I mean, not amazing, but at least we got one of the best F1 seasons on record to compensate for me turning 30 and edging closer to the grave. Feature-length animation, however, didn't have the best of times. A decent chunk were just average, pedestrian at best. Thankfully, there was enough quality out there or I'd be scrounging through the depths to find breadcrumbs for comfort. But which were the ones that shone brightly, entertained throughout, and most importantly, did the medium justice? With the criteria restricting my choices viewable on screen right now, it's time to flail excitedly with joy and ecstatic delight as I unveil my 5 best animated feature films of 2021. Before I start, let's look at the honourable mentions that just missed out. Encanto. I know I'm going to get some hate for this one. Modern CGI has advanced to make flowing, billowing skirts and big hair in motion the most satisfying thing ever, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one to think that. The animation, character design and shot framing are as spectacular as you would expect from Disney. Relatable themes of the crushing weight that familial traditions and the expectation of living up to them has on people hits home hard, especially given that the latter has been a source of personal mental anguish for decades. So the representation is thankful, with some solid songs breaking the ice, as Mirabelle was the perfect girl to lead us through it with drive and vigour. This should have set the film up for glory, but with so many characters shown and then left aside, a story that was content to take its sweet time to reach a quite foreseeable endgame, piloted with such severity to where its unusually cheery attitude feels counterintuitive, it meant that the film was unusually bloated considering its relative simplicity. At least it was occasionally funny, thematically substantial, and very, very pretty. Disney's post-2010 calling card in a nutshell, and arguably the pinnacle of their CG ventures aesthetically. Back to the Outback. Proof that endearing, cute, and witty talking animals can make me give a shit about anything, especially if the humans look as ugly as this. Ugh. It overcomes a cumbersome plot setup to unveil a child-friendly representation of Aboriginal discrimination through the unique lens of some of Australia's most dangerous fauna, to make the oft-used discriminating others is wrong, families whatever you make it, and find your true place in the world series of messages have very sharp teeth to sink into. Surprisingly good animation makes your eyes happy, with your ears responding in kind, as the cast sounded like they were having a blast bringing this ragtag animal crew to life. This helps you ignore the occasionally cringy dialogue, predictable story structure, and an over-reliance on mainstream music inserts to elevate it above what little was expected of it. A whale of a time, even if whales aren't in it. My Little Pony: A New Generation. While I could go into detail as to why this film is good, I've already done a review on it, which you can find in the top right corner, and it'll more adequately describe how I feel, because who'd have thought a film about pastel-coloured talking equines would leave me with so much to say? Luca. Burn him! Well, time for me to pen my last will and testament, as I'm almost certain to be beaten to death by Disney stans. Either way, decent by Pixar standards is great by anyone else's. No film is more apparent of that than this. Its adorable characters, lovely setting, era-appropriate soundtrack, and stunning animation and art style made me so damn happy you have no idea. Yet a restless plot that kept the characters constantly on eggshells, exposing a stark tonal imbalance which wasn't helped by a predictable, derivative narrative loosely adapted straight from The Little Mermaid and a very weak villain, meaning that it was in stark contrast to the calm vibe I anticipated and wanted, leading to quite a bit of disappointment. Luca and Julia, the cinnamon rolls that they are, have been living rent-free in my head ever since though, and thanks to the charming Ciao Alberto short that came out later, I am hoping that a sequel arrives to fix these noticeable flaws, because there was a damn good film in here, I just wished it managed to stick the landing. It's now time to look at the cream of the crop.
I'm sorry I couldn't send you off with a fancy crawfish sandwich.
You've done more for me than anyone in the history of people. Why don't you come to New York too?
This is your adventure. My place is here.
There was one thing that I got sick of seeing this year, realizing just how much of an animated movie cliche it was. The characters go on a long journey from location A to location B plot trope. Back to the Outback, Loud House, Jungle Beat, Vivo, Secret Magic Control Academy, MLP, and not for the first time, all contained it. I understand why this is done, as it gives the young'uns watching all new environments, strangers to act as conflicting entities, and an easy conclusion to map out, regardless of whether that journey ends on a positive note or not. It lends itself to mostly transparent and predictable storytelling that makes an adult like myself feel like a bystander, as the end result rarely lives up to any pretenses of grandeur. Then there's exceptions like Arlo the Alligator Boy, a film that sets its targets so bluntly that it could have fallen off the rails getting there, but had so much charm and resolute vigour that you can't help but be enamoured by its honesty, which is why it stuck around long after it was the film that started this whole venture. Its story is simple. Arlo gets drifted down to Louisiana, is raised by a hardened criminal, and then has to make friends with eccentrics of all shapes and sizes as he tries to find his family in NYC, all while he sings and dances through a Broadway catalogue of R&B, pop and soul bops that just makes you want to smile, coupled with an equally buoyant score to guide you. There! Not all animated films need to be deep to rub off on you, especially when you have such a naive cinnamon roll of a reptile leading the way. It's a heartwarming experience watching his lack of social skills gradually improve as his boundless optimism captivates all he meets and drives home the moral of accepting your differences and finding your place in the world. Hell, we got enough of those stories this year too, but unlike others, this was earnest, empathetic, and genuine. That enabled its expanding cast of characters to endear themselves to you, which, thanks to their striking designs and diverse voice performances, made that easy as hell to do when combined with sweet and occasionally blunt humour. I was laughing every other minute in this thing, and that's the sign of a good time. This charm wouldn't be possible though without the animation, which is buttery smooth, lovely to look at, and does 2D justice without many CG enhancements to speak of. It pulls you in and then lets the music and characters do the rest. It's a welcoming party, and you're invited. Huzzah! That cheerful mood, however, masks some flaws that make themselves apparent as the film goes on. Speaking of which, that sweet saccharine, high on positivity attitude can get quite tiring after a while. Its continued use in dramatic set pieces, for example, puts a handbrake on it severely as it progresses and soldiers through its third act, which leads to a foreseeable twist that, due to visual signifiers through framing and editing, I could see from a mile off, when included in a story so simple and open about its end goal was a little too on the nose for me. Not to mention that having the music of a similar style throughout was also a bit draining because they seemed to bleed into one another, which is the same issue I had with Vivo, to be frank. At least these were sung beautifully, so they weren't boring. Unlike most of Vivo's, and I know I'm probably going to get annihilated for that opinion, but we all have our own, so please respect mine if I end up respecting yours. Anyway, whilst this film was nowhere near perfect, the fact I came out of it not only excited that I'd seen a lovely little romp, but also realised that I had an episodic series to look forward to months later was delightful. That series though was fine, if anything, but most importantly it offered up more time to spend with these delightful societal renegades that the film bequeathed to me. They are the true success story, and they should be applauded thusly. Arlo the Alligator Boy was a shot of serotonin in animated form that I desperately needed. A film designed to make you feel good about yourself, remind you what empathy is if you've been embittered by the state of the world we live in, and have hope that through it all, things can and will get better. It's not the most elaborate or insightful of films, but it wasn't trying to be that and made no impression of doing so, unlike others aimed more at children than adults. It's a film made with love from all involved, and it shows. It may have its faults, but you can watch this and just feel so damn joyful. Sometimes, that's all we need. Speaking of which...
ちゃん珍しいところで会うな。ルパン助けてあげたいんだけどさ、後先考えずに飛び出しちまってな。なん
A lot of us are quite serious about animation because we love it. The derision and contempt given by some that we take quote-unquote kids programming too far, while occasionally justifiable, can be easily subsided when something comes along and reminds you why you consume this medium en masse in the first place. It's bloody fun to watch. No need for obscene amounts of analysis or critique, just something where you can sit back and enjoy, giving you a ruddy good time throughout its duration. That's where Lupin the Third the First settles into your living room to surprise you when you get home from work. Monkey Punch's long-running manga about a ragtag group of thieves and the bullish cop trying to capture them, headed by the most confident and charismatic ruffian ever put to ink, has seen many adaptations and a long-standing fanbase for over 50 years. Yet this, one of his most recent outings, was my first. Yes, it was the one that went to unknown visual territory and acted somewhat of a prequel, I think? An odd place to start, yes, but given that it got the accessibility seal of approval from a few superfan friends of mine, and the fact it got released in cinemas and on Blu-ray, meant I had an excuse to give it a shot. And I'm so glad I did, because damn what an impression to make! The first thing that grabs your attention is the animation. Japan has been slow to catch up to the West when it comes to making 3D CGI not only look good, but function. This is absolutely stunning. Detailed to the point of absurdity, cinematography that gives it all the space to maneuver, and trust me, it was worth it. Editing that's as sharp as a tack and has cartoonish elasticity, vibrancy and spontaneity in movement that you would expect from 2D, that's so smooth and consistent. This, ladies and gentlemen, is some of, if not the best CGI animation I have ever seen, and should be a case study on how to bloody do it. I mean, just look at this! It's phenomenal! Well worth the many years of anguish putting it together because it's the standout element that makes this film soar. Yet it isn't the only thing to latch onto, because once the film establishes each of its leading characters, their motives, and the overarching narrative enabling conflict from various angles, it begins to flaunt its hand with consummate ease. Through the use of character exchanges and prolonged exposition dumps between the entertaining espionage and action sequences, it creates a nice balance to keep a steady pace, so they spike and plateau at appropriate times, allowing that aura of coolness, composure and fun to ooze from every pore. It took itself deathly seriously, and not so when needed, to ensure that balance is maintained through an aloof yet demure sense of gravitas that doesn't go into the depths of absurdity and desperation. It's sure of its identity, which, coming from a series so long in the tooth, shouldn't be so surprising. You can tell the reverence for the characters is replicated in the fantastic voice acting too, that's passionate and has weight and versatility behind every verbalization, which, when sharing the space with the already noted animation, really brings it together. The plot to the uninitiated, though, may seemingly undo this work, as it goes from a simple series of heists into a quasi-connection to estranged familial pasts, and the rising again of the Third Reich. Yeah, I just said that. You sit there in stark bemusement that such an insane plot combining alien technology with a revised mid-20th century Europe post-war even fucking works. Yet it does, because it goes all in and doesn't pull its punches with that narrative lunacy contained within a simple-to-follow structure that doesn't bend like Lupin himself to tell it. It keeps you engaged and enthralled as it unfolds with jabs of jokes alongside the action to make you pine for more. Like I said up top, a film that is silly fun can come out of nowhere and impress, and this does that with precision. While these positives are ever bright and glowing, they do grind to a halt, albeit not in the largest of ways. While the smooth jazz and elaborate orchestral motifs were utilised to add playful spice to the already lively proceedings, their intermittent presence was largely forgettable, as they were often the same motifs and music repeated, making them lose their luster due to prolonged exposure, with their absence on occasion making a film oozing with warmth feel oddly cold for stretches. There's also one foreseeable plot revelation that was quite underwhelming in practice, not echoing the potential power it could have had, and the pacing, whilst consistent for the most part, did feel like it was elongating some scenes to where they outstayed their welcome, slowing to a crawl just so it could enable the rush of fury the action pieces then provide in earnest. It's a little disjointed, but when they add so much in-universe lore and honest character development in those sections to compensate, it just about makes up for it. Despite those notable stumbles, I had a blast with my first Lupin the Third experience, which sadly was the first to be released after its famed mangaka passed away. It doesn't take a superfan to acknowledge that this was a worthy tribute to him and the characters he created, even if my exposure to them was limited up until this point. It was a mad, elaborate, and downright fun film, something that the series has knowingly produced over the years and brings it to the forefront as a representation of just how good CGI can look and should actively be learned from. I couldn't care less that it wasn't anything more than what it offered, because it provided one of the most enjoyable viewing experiences that I had in 2021, as I revelled in its carefree spirit, proving its worth in spades. My first post-COVID venture into the cinema since Sonic the Freaking Hedgehog in February of 2020 came about purely because of this video venture. I saw Jose the Tiger and the Fish was on for just 2 days at my local community arts centre and thought, if I pencil in my second vaccine dose just right, I can go and see this without having to put on my eye patch and sail the cyber seas. Its premise looked interesting enough. A high school student in the need of money to save up for a marine biology excursion has to look after a wheelchair-bound girl, and despite initial animosity, they gradually become good friends. You know, simple rom-com stuff on paper. I was expecting this to fuel the odd trash-shaped hole that only anime could provide, yet it proved to be so much more than that. What eventually became melodrama incarnate started off reserved and unnerving, full of awkward and frosty dialogue, stuff that would usually cause me to run away from it as fast as possible. But thankfully it was hugged by the negative taboo construct surrounding the impact of being disabled in Japanese society that apparently still exists, to provide context for our lead heroine's actions and the initial barrier of entry that gradually opens up its gates. Jose, while being prickly, obstinate, and cumbersome in part due to the sheltered environment she'd been held in, eventually softened thanks to naive curiosity, understandable social anxiety, and her determination to achieve her goals in spite of ever-changing circumstances. It's a heartfelt message of following your dreams against the advice of those who say you can't, in a world actively working to stop you from doing so, and using the physical disability as an ever-present psychological hurdle for both protagonists to show how their friendships and goals hold up under immense strain. What looked like a bog-standard teen anime story over time displays inner complexity, and it's admirable. Everything that's done has a radiating influence that ensures all the characters feel each other's pain, exposing gradually expanding wounds which, when spread well over an elongated pace and runtime, allow Jose's relationship with high schooler Sunen and his group of scuba diving friends to blossom and eventually fragment as those relevant hardships present themselves. Every interaction and its lingering smouldering remnants has potential for conflict and plot progressing fireworks, making it a difficult story to detach from once it lays itself out on the table for you to consume. It wants you to trust these characters are able to find their voice and express themselves even if they're rather cold and isolating at first, and you see that growth through the time you spend with them, and it pays off magnificently. This one scene where Jose finally is able to read a children's book of her own illustrations in front of a gradually enraptured crowd was so damn beautiful, I shed many tears, which I wasn't expecting to do sitting with a mask on in the screening room. Why? It was well earned. Even if it wasn't the definitive endpoint of the film, it's a testament to that narrative through line I noted working like a charm. That scene and others like it are elevated by the film's restrained animation and music, audiovisually looking rather uninteresting from a distance, but when they pull their weight, this film has a striking beauty in its simplicity that makes you sit slack-jawed on occasion, eloquently accented by the score to heighten the senses and embolden the vision of a world through the eyes of a person who's rarely ever experienced it, with that liberating ocean symbolism doing the heavy lifting alongside it. The mundanity of modern life that we take for granted has heightened importance through those signifiers, which, given the already noted context, is a cherry on top of the cake. As a whole, this film willingly fed my expectations into a wood chipper, a novel concept unfurling to present itself with more complexity and profound intensity than I ever anticipated. That was worth paying £7.50 to see on the big screen. Its momentum, despite ahead of steam, was stunted by that teenage melodrama being forcibly injected when it really did feel unwarranted at times, especially with its ending going on for far too long, trying to replicate the sense of occasion closing moment that films like Your Name and A Silent Voice had. While it took the narrative back to where it all began symbolically, elongating the film longer than necessary really wasn't ideal. It also got on my nerves occasionally how certain characters' actions were a complete 180 from what they had exhibited prior, seemingly with no indication of it occurring in the first place. A little bit of finesse to plug the gaps would have been kindly appreciated. However, despite these intermittent, fleeting annoyances, this was an otherwise rather profound film to sit through. It was the surprise package of the year as far as I'm concerned. I expected anime fodder and got an unexpected feast instead. A film that is assured of itself and the story it's telling, and while it takes a whirlwind detour into chaotic teen romance territory, it does so whilst reaping the rewards of building up both lead characters' ever-evolving maturity, emotional sensibilities, and personal desires to where they return on that investment tenfold. Comparisons to Your Name and A Silent Voice were noted before I even entered the cinema, but thankfully its lean, understated and grounded nature more than make it hold its own against them, providing a soul-enriching yet willingly tense experience that scratched that specific itch at the right time to where it came away with the bronze medal position. It's an anime film that many have overlooked, but trust me, it's worth going out of your way to see it, and I can't wait to watch it again once it arrives on Blu-ray.
Si vous partez seul et que vous réussissez, personne ne le saura jamais. C'est ça que vous voulez? Vous avez besoin de preuves pour valider l'ascension. Vous avez besoin de moi.
J'ai besoin de personne. Maintenant, tu dégages.
There are times where you sit down to watch something on a streaming service and you think to yourself, well, there's no harm in watching this, it's probably going to be fine, only to then have your lowly expectations shot into the stratosphere. This is where I was with The Summit of the Gods. I saw it was arriving on November 30th and thought, well, it's another one for the list of films to watch for this project. It'll probably go somewhere in my positive honourable mentions because it doesn't look that bad. Yet once I was done watching it, I was scraping my brain cells wondering, have I just witnessed a classic or am I suffering from altitude sickness like the climbers were? Based on Jiro Taniguchi's 2000 manga adaptation of Baku Yumimakura's 1998 novel, we see a tale of determination, drive, and taking that leap of faith through the eyes of a photojournalist keen to prove a long-held myth and an esteemed yet reclusive mountaineer looking to achieve a goal to validate himself. Both men seek the same purpose that will make their working and personal life worth living, crossing each other despite divergent paths. Utilization of flashbacks between Makoto Fukumachi's gradual collection of information on Habu Joji's career in preparation to find him, and the latter's bold yet tragic life story that led him to seclusion is captivating viewing, settling into a steadily casual pace over its 90-minute runtime as it elaborates on everything that gets you into both of their heads, which will eventually unite them on a shared internal struggle and set out together to achieve the one goal they desire more than life itself, not wasting a single second in extolling it. Through relatable and fixated drama, it sets a serious tonal benchmark that doesn't let up throughout. Even in calmer moments, there's always this sense of lingering unease that creeps its way through every facet, existing to amplify their steely dedication with one eye focused on their desperation for it. It's awkwardly justifiable though, as showcasing the mental resolve required to push yourself through those barriers that separate the standard hobbyist from a professional on an emotional and psychological level, through a lot of hard work that goes on behind the scenes that is rarely acknowledged once a conclusion is reveled in. It's mesmerizing to see unfold. That slow pace, something that would kill most other films stone dead, is carefully implemented to where the stories of both men have a lot of breathing room for them to come together, make sense, and sustain that connection, so that when we reach that climactic ascent, you know just how dangerous it is for both of them, but also how much it means to them. A well built up to climax that amplifies the sense of trepidation that the film had been progressively stacking up, and we have around 25 minutes uninterrupted to be on the edge of our seats accompanying it. Will both men get what they want, or will it be all for nothing? That hook, once it establishes itself, never lets go. As deceptively simple animation with the environments constructed in 3D but built around 2D models draws you in with its muted yet bold colours to highlight the cold and severe realism of the mountain landscape and urban sprawl, noting their similarities much akin to our two sordid protagonists. Further brought up to fascinating levels of complexity with a brooding electronic soundscape, accenting the most sterile blank canvases with dramatic shudders and poignant odes of subtle subtext. Audiovisually, this well-wrapped package is capped off by phenomenal sound design, which captures the isolation and impact of every move made on rock, snow, tools, and body parts in stunning detail. It's a film that is drenched in an output of emotion, even when none is lingering through the most inhospitable of environments, as two men seek to find peace with themselves. It's humanity at its most stripped back and raw, and it was something that I just couldn't keep my eyes off of. Beautifully animated, voiced with sublime power and restraint, with a story that once it found its direction, never veered from it. I was left in awe before the ambiguousness of its melancholic ending set in and brought me back to terra firma. Was the price worth the cost? Especially when the unconventional narrative villains were nature itself and the desire to prove the size of one's hubris above all for one shot at glory? Just about. Gripping as it may have been to see unfold, to be left asking more questions than what was answered after a journey wrought with emotional significance, was painfully poetic, but left me uneasy and saddened. I felt like it didn't hit the nail on the head as I'd have liked it to, but in all fairness, life doesn't have black and white endings, just a sea of murky grey that one has to decipher. That is what makes The Summit of the Gods so damn special. Taking the medium, stripping its conventional eccentricities back, and telling a story about two strong characters that look rather ordinary from the surface, but hide a colossal sea of depth within. It's assembled so expertly that you can't complain about it with much severity. Hell, I struggled on that front. The aforementioned conclusion and the unsettling sledgehammer of hearing French voices coming from Japanese people were the only blemishes I could muster against a film that proves how robust this medium can be. Rarely has an animated feature felt so paralyzed when emotion, yet still alive and breathing. Calm and nervous, beautiful and ugly, courageous and maddening. It's a tale of diametric, juxtaposed opposites, hiding similarities that find a common ground to sync with and provide something truly breathtaking. If you take anything away from this video, go and watch this film, because magic is weaved into its subtlety. What hurts, though, is that even after all this praise, it wasn't my number one, with very good reason.
Dad, calm down.
Because you're leaving for school. I just want to talk to you.
Every kid leaves home. It's not the end of the world.
All the films that I've looked at so far are not just ones that have exceeded my expectations or shown me that they're the best of what 2D and 3D animation can offer, but have shown defiantly in a world full of apprehension, rigid cookie-cutter formulas, and profit-driven shortcuts that assured confidence and a clear sense of identity can make an animated film's quality shine as far as the eye can see. The Mitchells vs. the Machines is the poster child for that statement of intent, and I enjoyed it just a little too much. Not because it is more colourful and more fantastical than the prime cut of French art house cinema that is nestled underneath it, although that is definitely a factor, but because it won me over with so many things that should not have honestly worked, but did so anyway. The clashing of two divergent tonal, genre and plot areas is usually a recipe for disaster. I can understand why the story meshing a fractured, down-to-earth family road trip across the US, and oh god, there's that narrative chestnut rearing its head again, with rebelling AI robots repressing humanity, coating everything in a far-flung technological sheen full of memes and references that'll make you either point like DiCaprio or straight out wince. It looks so disjointed and polarizing from a distance to where it may not have clicked for some of you, noted animation reviewers included. Thankfully for me, it was executed with such poise and balance and unlikely precision that I honestly didn't care. The former provided an emotionally realistic backbone, whilst the latter offered up the thrills, spills, and humour necessary, and one would you expect from a family-friendly feature, to balance the fun and feels to where they share equal footing. Excitable and meaningful in nature, they gelled to where one action made me laugh, as another made me cry not long after. The sight of Rick viewing old family videos and good times with his then young daughter threw a tear-drenched monkey wrench into the course of where I expected this film to go. For a film to have me shed a lot of tears less than 20 minutes in was an early sign that it was special, and unlike Pixar's Up, it stuck the landing and confirmed it. Especially so when the story looked on many occasions to be heading in certain predictable directions, only to hit a curveball or sudden left turn on how it delivered on its own plot progression to take me completely by surprise. Although I really shouldn't say that, mostly because I was shouting at the screen for them to do exactly that. And they did, when most other films would have followed the simpler path. We are gradually allowed to get inside the family's separated minds and highlight their justifications and internal workings through their outward connections with one another, as they establish and subsequently repair their family bond. But not like cartoon characters, as close to real people as you can get, taking all the time in the world to ensure it was done, leaving no stone unturned, despite the fact that robots are setting the world on fire. In a world enraptured with technology, it exposes long-held fears about it, but not forgetting to proclaim why it is a source of good in the world, even if it is also just a middle finger to how tech companies are illegally profiting off us. Fundamentally, it's more concerned with using it as a focal point in addressing the apparent decline of the traditional nuclear family dynamic and how it has changed into the 21st century with great satire and bluntness, all before bringing you along with the painfully relatable ride to remind you of what's important. Your family make you, you. Proving that without the unique qualities of our relatives, life would not be the same or worth every experience they've helped manifest, which, given the COVID times, is even more apparent. I do understand that this may not wholly reflect or represent your family dynamic, but it's one template that you can hopefully find escapist comfort in. It also stresses, through the conflict between father and daughter, that both you as an individual and our society as a collective have to adapt and move out of your comfort zone, regardless of your reluctance to do so, as a lot can be learned from the past and the future tech. Knowledge is power, and it's necessary to survive socially as the world evolves. It's vitally important for all generations, and a great but frantic case study in how we can all learn from each other's lived experiences if given the time to civilly figure things out and not let our emotions get the better of us. It is a phenomenal message, and it emboldens the main thing that I love about this film. How can something with this kind of sobering, intricate, and remarkable substance entertain me so damn much. We go from all that to having them confront a giant Furby in one of the best product placement spots I have ever seen, witness the mother going on a murderous, bloodthirsty, robot-destroying rampage to protect her child, and have an AI phone vent her anger by screaming as she flops around on a table, arguably the most cathartic yet gut-bustingly hilarious moment of the year. Especially when you have to just imagine Oscar winner Olivia Colman executing it in the recording booth to make it even more funny. This all should not be possible, yet here we are. The divergence between the two sides of this film are apparent, but my god does it keep you on your toes. At its heart, this film is just straight up weird, but not ashamed to admit that and run with it. You have to accept and come to terms with that mantra to get the most out of it. And boy howdy did I do that. The biting and hilarious script, the passionate voice acting and aloof visual excess floods your senses. The combination of winsome, hand-drawn 2D graphics and the Stretch Armstrong mixed with slinky CG build on the comic book influence foundations that Sony built with Spider-Verse that was just wonderful to spectate. It's bold as hell, but it rams home the point that CGI doesn't have to be so sterile. It can show creativity and artistry by keeping it attached to its cartoonish roots, something that honestly many films of similar ilk these days are missing. It catches your eye and then pulls them out of their sockets, something that all animated films should strive to do, and the fact this one does is magnificent. Also, another feather in this film's cap is that Katie's LGBT standing is not mentioned directly at all, allowing visual subtext to do it all for us. She's treated like a normal person, not an overly exaggerated cliche standing out from the crowd for mandated representation points, which is how it should be. Plus, she's a positive representation of a content creator and a female main character who isn't a love interest as a core plot, character progression, or conflict point, which is a rarity in a Western animated family film individually. But all three together? It proves that Katie Mitchell is a treasure that we should all be happy exists. Hell, all of the Mitchells are wonderful in their own way because you get their perspective and where they're coming from because it's not artificially hammed up for Hollywood drama. This realistic family dynamic manages to bounce off of the craziness that's surrounding them thanks to quiet moments that allow them and the scale of the plot give an appropriate space to elaborate themselves naturally, bringing things back to a grounded level with the score doing its job to heighten the sincere, heartwarming, and sentimental highs to cap it off fantastically. But despite all of these positive connotations, this film can feel overwhelming at times through its intense, reckless abandon and ever-fluctuating pacing. Even I can't deny that. It really goes hand over fist to justify its rather inauspicious core that, given the whole robots destroying the planet thing that it's wrapped in, this can really be jarring and brings some issues to the forefront. Does Aaron's anxiety sandwich of a crush on their neighbour's daughter feel tonally out of place given everything else going on? Yes. But it gives something for him to focus on when everyone else has a conflict and plot thread to call their own, which shows how well constructed this film is. Is it a little long for what story it's telling, especially given that it could have ended before the epilogue? Yes, but that ending was a full circle summary and completion for all those noted arcs. Nothing is left to rot, and it's appreciated. When the smallest approximation of what I consider negatives can be easily justified, with the only outright one for me being that Aaron's voice sounds a little too adult for a goddamn 8-year-old, this film is worthy of this top spot. The Mitchells vs. the Machines delivers a fireworks show of fantastical fun and poignantly relatable themes whilst offering up a truly marvellous CGI bastion that basically showcases what I love most about the animated medium: its expressiveness and frankly astounding malleability. when the 4 biggest animation releases of the year, Raya, Vivo, Luca, and Encanto, tried too hard to come across as more mature for a wider and smarter moviegoing audience, or were indecisive in choosing what was tonally appropriate in the name of precariously balancing entertainment and being taken seriously, they failed to live up to expectations by playing it too safe. The Mitchells vs. the Machines felt like it had nothing to lose, embraced its eccentricities, and thanks to its sheer bravado and confidence, smashed it out of the park. It didn't care for restraint, went all in on its concept, and looked like $1 million in the process, and its quality shone for all to see. It made me howl with laughter through its chaotic energy and lively humour, cry less than 20 minutes in, thanks to its pure emotional core, and I sat intensely, invested in the ball-busting action on the edge of my seat, all whilst learning some valuable life lessons from a cast of wholly likeable, realistic characters and their cute yet charmingly dumb dog. Even the main villain had understandable justifications, despite being a figurative arse about it, and a piece of goddamn software to boot, being the threatening and terrifying menace that most of the features this past year had a hard time touching. This film was everything I wanted it to be, and was the only choice for #1 from the moment I saw it. I'm hoping it wins the Oscar for Best Animated Feature, because out of all the films released in 2021 that were animated, it is a joyful ode to how great this medium is, and it deserves to be acknowledged as such. I have been Freddie Thomas, you've been people watching, this is the CT Network, and I will see you all next time.